So hello, everyone, and welcome to Smart City Kids Workshop on the Leap from Elementary to Middle School. My name is Erica Papier, and I'm the Director of Business Development and Corporate Relations at Smart City Kids. I'm also the parent of a 4th grade boy and an 8th grade girl. We're very appreciative that you took time out of your busy day to join us. I promise you will find the session to be tremendously productive, and you will leave today with new tools for your parenting toolbox. I want to briefly introduce Smart City Kids so you know the extent of the services we provide for parents, students, corporations, and schools. For over 20 years, Smart City Kids educational consultants have guided parents and students through the admissions process for entrance into all grade levels, starting in nursery school and continuing all the way through college admissions, including boarding school and special education. We work with families throughout the New York area, as well as across the globe for families who are relocating. Smart City Kids also has clients that are schools and corporations, and we provide guidance about parenting, education, admissions, and relocation. We offer parenting sessions where we help parents navigate issues they are struggling with. We also have an extraordinary group of highly experienced tutors who support students of any age and ability, virtual or in person, with subject work, executive function, and test preparation. And last but not least, Smart City Kids offers over 50 workshops a year, and we hope you will continue to attend our sessions. I am honored to have the opportunity to introduce our 2 speakers for today. First, Dr. Jane Gertler. Dr. Gertler was the director of the Office of Teaching and Learning at the Churchill School and Center, a kindergarten through 12th grade school for students with learning disabilities in New York City. Before Churchill, Jane spent more than 20 years as a school administrator in Westchester, serving as the director of special education in Irvington, prior to becoming the director of special education and then director of curriculum, assessment, and professional development in Edgemont. Jane has extensive experience in the area of executive function, skill development, and developing the growth mindset. She frequently presents workshops on these topics to parents, teachers, and school administrators. I'm also very excited to introduce you to Michelle Cristella, who has been an educator for 16 years, serving independent schools of New York City for 12 years, 9 of those as an administrator. She is currently the head of middle school at Friends Seminary in New York City and has a genuine love for working with middle school students. She strives towards fostering a supportive and positive environment for both students and teachers to learn, grow, discover, take risks, and push themselves to higher levels. Michelle believes firmly in the importance of the whole child and the necessity to ensure social emotional wellness and stability in each student as the path to a successful education. Michelle and Jane will present for around 45 minutes and then leave time for questions at the end. Before I turn the floor over to Michelle, I wanted to share that we are pleased to offer a promotion for parents attending today, which will be 15% off of a package of tutoring sessions with Smart City Tutors for 4 academic or executive function sessions. So you can feel free to reach out to me for more information about that offer. Okay, so I will turn the floor over first to you, Michelle, and thank you all very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with everyone today. As Erica mentioned, I really love working with middle school students and middle school teachers. And I think often when people hear what I do for a living, they're like, wow, middle school, I wouldn't want to go anywhere near that. But I'm here to tell you a little bit about what that shift looks like coming from lower school to middle school, and to let you know that you have nothing to be afraid of, that this is actually a really exciting time within your child's educational career and experience. And there are going to be hiccups and bumps along the way, but that's because middle school is all about making mistakes, learning from those mistakes, and really discovering who your child might be as an individual student and learner, and what they might be looking forward to once they get beyond middle school. So I think one of the biggest differences between the elementary school experience and the middle school experience is that middle school ends up being departmentalized, right? So in most elementary school settings, your child has probably been used to having one dedicated homeroom teacher, that solid classroom teacher that they have for the majority of their subject areas, with maybe the exception of some of their specials classes, such as PE or music or art. Whereas once students enter the middle school space, typically speaking, most middle schools are completely departmentalized, meaning that they're going to have a different teacher for math versus science versus English and history. And so that is a big shift, because not only is the school day then departmentalized, but that means that the children are also becoming accustomed to understanding that each teacher might have a different approach to the way that they run their classroom. So they might have different classroom expectations or different routines and systems from one class to the next. And so really kind of supporting the students in understanding that they might have to make adjustments on their end in terms of how each classroom is run or handled, and what the expectations might be surrounding the work within that class. Another thing that comes with that departmentalized approach is that very often, for the first time in middle school, students are responsible for getting from point A to point B on their own. And this is a really big deal, and it's really exciting, because they're no longer lining up with their classmates and necessarily being escorted from their homeroom to, say, the art studio for art, but they get dismissed at the end of the class period. And then you've got these little 10-year-olds running around like, oh, okay, I got to figure out how I now get to my English class, right? And then also, not only am I getting to my English class, but I might have maybe 5 minutes in between my classes. So what do I do with those 5 minutes, right? So it's a really big deal, because they not only have to get from point A to point B, but they're navigating maybe some of their social interactions, making sure that they have the materials that they need for their next class. So most likely in middle school, they'll have some type of a locker space or maybe a little cubby space, and students have to become accustomed to figuring out what materials do I need to grab when I leave one class, to make sure that I have maybe my composition book that I might need for my science class because we're writing up our lab reports today, or whatever it might mean. So I think that departmentalization, like I said, is probably one of the biggest changes and shifts into middle school. I think some of the other big changes that you're going to see are other ways in which students might have some level of independence. And this can be seen in spaces even such as the cafeteria. I think a lot of times in elementary school experiences, students sit at tables in a cafeteria assigned by their classroom. So, and in some cases, they might even have a specific assigned seat at that table. Whereas typically in middle school, they all go to the cafeteria and they get to pick where they sit. And this too is a really big deal, and it's a really big decision that a lot of the students are making. So it's another example of some of that independence and freedom that the students are being given in the middle school years. And I think too that all of these little examples of independence, right? Being in the cafeteria, choosing where I sit, getting from my classroom, from one class to the other on my own. This is because in middle school, we're really focusing on developing the skills that the students are going to need to be successful in high school. We want them to be independent. We want them to have responsibility and agency over their learning. We want them to develop self-advocacy skills so that as they come across different challenges or bumps in the road, they know how to say to their teacher or their advisor or to their parent, I need help with fill in the blank, right? And understanding what types of resources they might have access to within their middle school environment to provide some of that support. I also think too that once we enter middle school, not only are we now facing some challenges related to our academics, because perhaps the expectations for our academic engagement is a little bit higher, especially with the fact that we want students to develop more independence. But there are a lot of other things that are happening in your middle schooler's brain and body that impact their experiences on a day-to-day basis, right? And so many middle school students at some point enter the stage of puberty, and there are all sorts of things going on in their body that they can't control, and they have emotions that can be all over the place sometimes, and that certainly impacts their day-to-day experience within the middle school community and culture. But I also think that that's what makes, in my opinion, most middle school educators so special, because they know how to work with students who are going through those different phases and challenges within their life, and understand the ways in which puberty can impact social and peer dynamics and interactions, and the way in which it impacts students' ability to engage within the classroom setting and the work that they're being asked to engage with. I also think sometimes with our middle school students, I think you've heard me say a lot about peers and that social interaction. Middle school is a time where the socialization is really at the core of what the middle schooler wants to do, right? They wake up in the morning wondering who's going to be my friend today, and they go to bed at night wondering, and who's going to be my friend tomorrow. And so the desire to be connected with their peers certainly increases. And you might see that they start to pull away a little bit from wanting to be as connected and spending as much time at home within your family structure, because those peer relationships are taking a precedent over other relationships within their life. And so I think it's really important that as students are developing these friendships and relationships with their class peers, that there are open lines of communication between the child and their family at home, between the family and the school, whether that's an advisor or a classroom teacher, however the middle school that your child attends has that structure set up. Because I think when there is a significant amount of communication and collaboration within those different spaces, that's when we're able to provide the best support to the students in terms of helping them navigate some of those social challenges and dynamics, because they do impact the classroom space. In middle school too, I think a lot of middle school experiences are centered around collaboration and communication, and developing those skills within the middle school experience. So again, that kind of ties back to that social aspect and the social piece of really wanting to make sure that we're taking care of our middle schoolers on the social and emotional front, because when we do that, that means that they're able to fully engage in their academic experience and bring their best academic self to the classroom as well. I also think too, in the last year, more so than years prior, that we've seen a huge increase in the ways in which middle school students interact with one another through social media platforms and technology. And I think a lot of that is stemming from us coming out of the pandemic, when we were in a period of time where we all relied so heavily on technology and Zooms and FaceTimes and social media, because it was a way for us to stay connected and to kind of get through that really intense initial part of the pandemic. And now that we're back in person fully, there's no distancing, there are no masks, like it's really back to normal school, we still have that technology piece hovering over our students. And so for a lot of our children, depending on when families are making the decision to allow their child access to technology, a lot of our children, they leave at the end of the school day, and there's no time for them to almost have an opportunity to be disconnected from their peers, to kind of process, what did I just experience today at school, in my classes with my friends, because they're on their devices almost immediately upon leaving at the end of the school day, right? So there's like this constant loop of feeling like I need to be in it with all of my peers at school, whether that's in person or online. And so I think that in a lot of middle schools right now, you're seeing a real increase in the type of programming that middle schools are offering to students and teachers, but also to parents about how do we work together to support our children and help them have a healthy relationship with social media and technology, and not kind of losing some of those interpersonal connections and skills that that the kids need to have in terms of developing those peer relationships. And I think I have a couple of minutes left. So I think one of the other topics that I wanted to touch upon is what are the expectations of a middle school student? And this is really important because I think that in some of the lower school or elementary school years, and I'll even say this with my own parent hat on, I have a daughter who's in second grade. It's so easy to kind of want to swoop in the moment and like save the day, right? Like she leaves her planner on the kitchen table, and I know that she needed it to turn into her teacher for, to prove that she did her reading for the week. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. That's not my responsibility to grab that planner and put it in her backpack to give it to her teacher. That as parents, we have to kind of like lean back and lean out to allow the students to make the mistake, right? Because if they have this idea that us as parents are always kind of there as a safety net to come in and bring that big project to school that they left on the kitchen table that they've been working on for the last 2 weeks, like that doesn't really help them develop the skills that they need to remember, like, oh, I worked on this project for 2 weeks and now it's my responsibility to turn it in. And so the expectation in middle school is that the students really are developing agency over their learning, that they're communicating directly with their teachers or with their advisor when there's something that they need, right? If they are sick for a couple of days and they're out of school, that we want the child to develop those skills to be able to say to their teacher, hey, I was out sick. Can you find time to meet with me so I can make up the work that I might have missed? Or if they know they're going to be out of school in advance of something because there's a family event and they're missing a day or two of school, to be able to have that conversation with their teachers or advisor. Or if they don't do very well on an assignment, for them to be able to say to their teacher, like, hey, I would have liked to have done better. Can I meet and learn a little bit more about where did I miss the mark on this particular assignment and how can I improve in this area? And again, we really want to foster that independence so that the child is taking the lead on that, and that you as the parent are kind of like in the background, cheering them on, right? Maybe giving them some suggestions on how to craft that email or who to ask a certain question of, but we really want the middle school student taking the lead and doing those things themselves. So I think that would kind of be like the biggest expectation for middle school, that self-advocacy piece, managing their time, managing their assignments, and not being afraid to ask questions or say, I need a little bit of help.
That's all really helpful. And I've been nodding and nodding and nodding because I have an 8th grader and we're finishing middle school and heading towards high school next year, but I'm nodding in agreement with everything that you're saying. So thank you for all those words of wisdom.
Of course.
So I think if you finished your piece, and I'm impressed you had a minute or two even to spare, so that's amazing. I think Jane, we'll pivot to you for your section.
Okay, so thank you very much. And Michelle highlighted all the reasons why your middle schooler really does need to have the skills to be independent, to be able to manage their time, manage social media, be flexible when they go from class to class and have teachers with different personalities and different expectations. So I was jotting down some notes as Michelle was talking, and all of those skills that your children need in order to be successful come under the umbrella of executive function skills. And as parents, as Michelle said, which is 150% correct, you want your children to be more independent. You don't want to hover. You don't want to be the one working on the project at 10 o'clock at night that your child didn't finish. You don't want to be the one bringing their lunch because they forgot it, etc. But unless your child has those skills, it's difficult for them to be independent. And our expectations have to match their skill level. So what I'm going to do now is I have some PowerPoint slides. I don't think I'll get to all of them, but let's get started and talk a little bit about executive function. Okay, so executive function is a set of skills that basically allow all of us, kids and adults, to manage our day, to be successful. And if you go online, there are hundreds of sites that have a lot of resources for executive function skills, but they all, if you wanted to distill it, they come down to these 5 areas of organizing, and time management is part of organizing, goal setting, working memory, how you can keep things on that platform in your brain and do more than one thing at one time, being cognitively flexible. That's knowing that Mrs. Smith's personality is different from Mr. Gordon, and how do I adjust when I walk into that class? Or what they want me to have ready is one wants me to come in and take my notebook out right away, and the other one doesn't. So being flexible, being able to shift. And then self-monitoring has to do with self-monitoring our behavior, our feelings, regulation. And again, that is very much tied into what Michelle was talking about, social media. Okay, so now I'm trying to go to the next slide. There we go. So this is just an example of how we can think of the executive function skills. So if you have Sarah, a student who has to be at school by 8:30, and there are a whole bunch of things that she has to do, and in the middle of this circle were just a few of them. It takes her 5 minutes to brush her teeth, 10 minutes to eat breakfast, 25 minutes to walk to school. She also has to get dressed, she has to get her things together, etc. So all the things that Sarah has to do involve executive function skills. And again, it's the organization, setting goals, her working memory, shifting focus, sustaining her effort, self-monitoring, and managing her frustration, because we all know that all of us, and middle schoolers are right up there with us, have frustration. So as parents, if you cannot answer these questions, this is something that you should think about, because you really should have this information about your children. How do they organize their assignments now? When they come home from school, how does that whole process of doing homework get started? Do you leave them totally on their own? Or have you reviewed with them what they need to do and are confident that they understand what they have to do? Do they use a different binder for each subject or one large binder? I know when my kids were in school years and years ago, they had something called a trapper keeper. And the kids liked it at the beginning, but by mid-year, this trapper keeper was one big mess. It just had so much in it. So your child may go to a school where they have different books, different notebooks for different subjects. They've also, by middle school, the kids have learned how to save things electronically, which is a huge plus for kids. It's very difficult to say the dog ate my homework, because you can file everything on your computer. But when we're talking about what kids need, where they need print and paper, one suggestion is, do they have binders or notebooks that are color-coded? Because when Michelle was saying they may have 5 minutes to go to their locker and get out the science notebook, and if all the binders or all the notebooks are the same color, they're going to have to thumb through them to figure it out. If they are different colors, they know orange is science, there it is, I'm going to grab it. So that's just one suggestion that you might want your children to use. What type of backpack do they use? How is it organized? Have you ever looked into it? Do your kids understand that they should be cleaning out their backpacks on a periodic basis, whether it's at the end of the week, at the end of 2 weeks. And that's something that you should be working with your child on so that they have the skills. But again, I'm referring to Michelle, we want our kids to be independent. So you might say to them, so what day of the week do you want to empty out your backpack and take out what you don't need? And and you're not saying, do you want to? No, that's not the option. The option is the kid's decision is when do they want to do it? And then the first several times you're going to have to sit with them and help them figure out how they can organize things that come out of the backpack, but they want to keep, whether you're scanning it into a computer, whether you're setting up a file cabinet at home for the kids or files. But again, the goal is to have them do this independently. Because if you do it, you say, well, it's so much easier for you to just go in and organize that backpack. But all that shows is that you know how to organize a backpack, not your child. So again, you want them to be independent. Homework. What does that homework space look like? And you'll see in a second some strategies to help your child organize their homework. Not every child has his or her own room or own desk, but we need to be able to set up some space for our child to be able to have their work, even if it's a crate that they can put their things in, and when they have to do their homework, that crate has the supplies that they need to do their homework. What do they do with papers that they don't think they need but are afraid to throw away? Again, now with computers, it's much easier to save it electronically. When my kids were young, I let them have a shopping bag at the end. Again, this is a long time ago, so we didn't file things on the computer. So at the end of the year, and they saved all this stuff, then they had to go through it again, and they had one shopping bag. If it didn't fit into the shopping bag, it went out. And that was how we managed the space that we lived in. So the organized student at home has to identify a well-organized workspace. So let's say your child is doing their work at a table near the kitchen or near the dining room, but they have a dedicated space for themselves. One of the suggestions that I have is when they start and it all looks really neat, like the second picture from the left, you take a photograph of that workspace. That's what the workspace should look like at the end of the day before they go to sleep. Or you might say it's not feasible for all kids. That's what it should look like at the end of the week before they start the next week. And so by photographing that workspace that they have organized, when it gets to be really messy and we can't find anything or they can't find anything, all you have to do is say to them, you know what, let's take a look at that photograph that we have of the workspace when it was all organized. And let's see if you can get it back to how it was. You don't have to argue. You're not doing it for them. They have a visual and they can see what they need to do to get that space organized. The same thing for establishing a routine. When are they going to do it? And a routine for organizing backpacks. But that photograph is very helpful. And this happens to be a photograph from Erica's daughter from a few years ago. So the next big area of executive function that kids really need to understand is time management. And unless they understand the sense of time and the passage of time, it's very difficult to expect them to have time management skills. So by middle school, I would say the expectation is that the kids understand time and the passage of time. When we talk about executive function skills for young elementary school children, this doesn't come into play because they don't have that understanding. So one of the things that I really think is important when kids are looking at their homework assignments is to be able to ask themselves, is this something that's easier for them to complete, or will it be more challenging? And they have to use that knowledge with their past experience to estimate how much time it will take to complete your assignment. I know when I was at Churchill, the teachers used to work with the kids on that, because this is not an easy skill for kids to have. But as parents, you should be able to do it with your child as well. Because if your child has to manage their time and learn to be independent, if they don't have a sense of how long it takes for them to do a math assignment or read a chapter in a book, they're not going to be able to manage their time. They're going to be all over the place. And that's when you get the meltdowns at 10, 11 o'clock at night, because kids have run out of time. So I know schools have different planners that they have kids use, whether it's paper or digital. And so whichever system works in school, the child is bringing that home. And at home, the child should be looking at each assignment and estimating how long it will take. And in addition to estimating how long it will take, they should decide the order for completing their work. Again, we want the kids to be independent. Here are some bullet points about what they should do that will help them be independent. So I know that when your kids are doing their homework, there are two schools of thought. One is do the easiest assignment first. You get it over with, you have a sense of accomplishment, and you can check it off, and then you can move on. The other school of thought is do the most difficult assignment first, because you get it over with, and then you can move on. You know your child, and this is a discussion that you should have with your child, and let them try different ways of doing it. The most difficult assignment first, the lengthiest assignment first, or the reverse. If your child is someone who needs instant gratification, then I would say have them do the easiest assignment first. They can check that off. Maybe they only have 3 other homework assignments afterwards. If your child gets tired towards the end of the day and they're working on their homework, then maybe they should do the assignment that is most challenging, because they have the most energy at the beginning. But again, I don't think you should be telling your child what to do first. I think you have to have a discussion with your child and get their viewpoint about what they should do first. And you help, this is all very fluid. It doesn't mean you're going to do math homework every day first thing. No, let it be fluid. And I'll show you some ways of keeping track of the actual time after completing an assignment. And then the kids have to put their assignment in the homework folder, or if they're sending it to their teacher electronically, they need to do that. And then they put a check mark in the done column. So let's see what that looks like. So this is a typical assignment book, or something that you could set up at home. Your child has the assignment. They estimate how long it will take, what the actual time was, the order, is it going to be, are they going to do it first, second, third? And then when it's done, they make note of that. And basically what this is doing is this is helping your child develop his or her plan, not your plan, their plan for getting their work done. And they may be surprised. They may think that it's going to take 30 minutes to do a math assignment and it only takes 15. And if that routinely happens, then when they're looking at their schedule and what they want to do after school that's not homework related, they'll be able to see how much time they have. So time management, what I like to do, and again, you'll see different words to do that people use about must do's, could do's, should do. So it's obligations, aspirations, negotiations. So when kids are filling out a schedule, and again, since from, let's say from 8 to 3, they're in school, so there's not much that they have to fill out in terms of making decisions, but after school, there are some obligations that they have, and that should be on their planner. Want to do. These are things that have time elements involved. So if your child is involved in sports or performing arts or religious school, etc., and they want to set up their schedule, this should be on their schedule. And then they have a could do. There's no set time frame. It's important, they want to do it, but they have to figure out when could they do these things. And these are just a few examples. So what does it look like? So you can set up something like this for your child where they have a daily guide for the must-dos, wanna-dos, and could-dos. And again, this is after school. So this is just an example. I was working with a family, and they had the child was coming up with a to-do list for Saturday and Sunday. So just take a look at this for a second, and there should be something that you notice that's not really good about this. And that is that on Saturday, they have all these fun things that they're doing. And then what happens on Sunday? Sunday is like, ugh, I don't want to even look at Sunday. I have to study. I have homework. I have an English paper. I have chores to do. This is not how I want to spend my Sunday. So if you have a child who comes up with this type of a plan for the weekend, the discussion that you should have is, well, let's look at this. How do you think you're going to feel on Sunday at 7 o'clock? Not great. So is there anything that you can move around? Are there things that you could do on Saturday and then move some things to Sunday? So again, this is a discussion and you helping your child make the decision. You are not making the decision for them. And as Michelle said, your kids will make mistakes like leaving their homework at home. That's how they're going to learn. You can help your child when middle school, they may start to have more long-term assignments. And what you can do as a parent is help your child break down that large task into smaller tasks. And again, that can go on their planner. Kids start to use note cards. They have to study for an exam. They have a project that involves artwork. They have research they have to do. How are they going to do it? So if it's due on Monday, Sunday night, everybody's hysterical in the house because that project hasn't been done. And this is just an example of a weekly planner. So you can find these planner templates online and whatever works for your child. And then you can have them fill in these different must-dos, wanna-dos, could-dos. So then finally, and I think I have 5 more minutes. Yep. I just want to talk a little bit about goal setting. Michelle mentioned goals, setting goals, that your children have to set goals. And one of the things that I propose is that you help them with their goal setting, because this might be very challenging, but you want your children to have goals that are clear and that are doable. So for example, I always like to start when I'm working with families choosing goals to choose a non-academic goal. So maybe it has something to do with sports. I want to be a better dribbler in basketball. I want to be able to, for me, my goal would be I want to finally get my serve in consistently in pickleball. So you can help your child set up some goals, and they have to be clear, appropriate, numerical. You have to be able to measure them, and you have to list the steps. And most importantly, you have to consider what obstacles may come your child's way when they're setting their goals up. So here's an example of short-term goals to help achieve a long-term goal. This was an academic goal. So this is a student who wants to have a B+ in science. And they came up with some of their short-term goals or the doable steps. So this might be some of the doable steps so that they could get that B+. So they still want that B+, but now they have to think about what obstacles may come their way. And when you sit with your child and you help them develop their goals, and again, they will be able to do this independently, but not yet. They're going to need your help at the beginning. And so you say to them, so what do you think could go wrong if you want to get a B+ in science, or you want that paper to get a B+ on your paper? And if they can't come up with anything, then you help them. So what happens if you forget your notes at school? What happens if you don't understand the lesson and then you can't do your homework? What happens if you're too busy with other work? or if your grandparents are coming over unexpectedly and you're not going to have time to do everything. So you have this discussion with your child before it happens. You have a what if, so that they're not in the moment, that they can calmly and logically, with your help at the beginning, come up with solutions to those obstacles. And very often we set goals for ourselves as adults, but we never consider the what ifs, what could get in our way. And what I'm suggesting is that this is something that you should have your kids consider when they're developing goals. We want to encourage flexibility. So you make sure you build in choice. When you look at your child's schedule, make sure that they are making decisions about things that they want to do. And that's about it. But so you've got the elevated version of executive function skills.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane. That was incredibly helpful. So we'd like to give people an opportunity. There already are some questions, but we'd like to give people an opportunity to put questions and we will address them. So I'll start off with something that came up already. Michelle, I'll start this one for you about homework. How involved should parents be with their kids' homework? It's sort of a few-tiered question. And at what point should parents contact the school if their child is having trouble, or should they be encouraging their child to be self-advocating? So can you talk to us a little bit about middle school and homework?
Yeah. So I think I had mentioned earlier about that idea of like, when do I lean in? When do I lean out? And I think homework is a time to lean out, right? That we really shouldn't be overly involved. I think that it's fine to be checking in with your student, maybe wanting to see their planner, right? We heard some really great tips from Jane about what type of planner to use and how to maybe structure that. And depending on the middle school, like in certain middle school experiences, the school might provide the planner and have like a very specific way in which students are expected to use it across the board in all of their classes, which is always great then, especially in grades 5 and 6, because it helps them kind of develop that routine and system. So I think that initially parents should be checking in to say, what assignments do you have? Show me that you've completed them or that it's in the right folder to be returned to your teacher. In some cases, a school might have what we call a learning management system, and that's like an online platform where teachers are able to post assignments. There might be a digital calendar that they're asking students to engage with. And I think it's totally fine and acceptable for maybe the parent to say, hey, why don't you pull up your Canvas page or your Schoology page? I'd love to see what you've got going on in science this week or whatever it may be. But we really shouldn't see a level of micromanagement where you're necessarily even checking the homework and then telling them to fix something, right? Because what we want to see as the teachers at school is what is the child capable of doing. And if what they're turning in has been completed with a significant amount of parental support, that's not necessarily giving us a very clear picture of where the child is. And then it gets in the way of us being able to scaffold the experience appropriately for the child. Now, I think if like the child is totally floundering, there might be a different story where sometimes I'm having conversations with parents and I'm like, nope, we need to lean back into this moment because your child needs more support in terms of getting some of their work done at home. So I think it's kind of figuring out the balance between the two. I also think in terms of that like communication piece, sometimes what I've encouraged my families to do is, maybe instead of sending the email on behalf of the student, maybe reaching out to the advisor or the teacher, whoever it may be, to say, hey, I told Michelle to come and chat with you this morning. There was some difficulties she had with the math homework last night. Just putting it on your radar, right? As opposed to kind of going into all the nitty gritty and the details, it still kind of gives us at school a heads up that this is happening, and then we can try and support the student in maybe checking in with them in a way that encourages them to feel like they can advocate on their own.
I would just add one thing, because I think everything you said was spot on. One of the things I think parents can do when they say to their child, you need to speak to your teacher, and they give the teacher a heads up, is to rehearse that conversation that their child is going to have with the teacher. Because for some kids, that is really tough to do. There are lots of kids who have no trouble, but if your child is not like that, you want to rehearse with him, do a little role playing.
That's a great suggestion.
It is.
Hey, a couple of more questions that have come up. So this actually could be for both about testing in middle school. So how parents can support their children in being prepared for tests. And Jane, you talked, I think, a lot of what you spoke to in terms of goal setting and time management and all of those executive function skills, but specifically for preparation for big projects or tests.
Well, I think for big projects, it's the time management piece and the planning, the different parts, breaking down that task, that big task, into smaller tasks. When they're preparing for a test, I think that the school gives the kids the tools that they need, whether they're note cards or outlines. So the first thing as a parent that I would do is to ask my child, so what's going on in class in order to help you prepare for the test? And then if they haven't the foggiest, and you say, well, do you want to go over your work with me? And if you can see that they have notes, well, what do you think you should do with your notes so that you can prepare? And obviously that comes to highlighting, but I'm sure that that's done in school. So it's just really asking the questions. I think it's very difficult for parents to reteach the content because if your child is having difficulty, you may be teaching them in a way, especially I always think of math as the top one. The way you learn math may not be the way your child is learning math. So if you're trying to help and teach them how to do long division, and it's not the way the teacher is doing it, you're going to just have your child more confused. So I think that a lot of the skills, the specific study skills the kids are getting in school, and your job as a parent is helping them organize themselves at home so that it's not a last minute preparation. And that's all the time management that the kids should be doing.
Thank you. Okay, we have two more questions. One, Jane, this is for you. How can a parent help a child who has zero time awareness, someone who has been diagnosed with ADHD?
Okay. So zero time awareness, that's a stretch for a middle schooler to have no awareness of time. ADHD, kids with ADHD, their main issue is that they can hyperfocus and something that they're really involved in, but they may only be able to focus or do homework in small chunks of time. So for a child with ADHD, to expect them to sit down at a desk and do their work for 45 minutes, not going to happen. So you, again, are having this discussion with your child and you set it up in increments. Maybe it's 15 minutes. Let's see what happens. And you have a timer. And, for little kids, there's these timers that you can buy. For the older kids, they have it on their phones, they have it on their watches, and you set up a timer. Let's see what you could get done in 15 minutes. Because the only way they'll know is by experiencing it.
Okay, next question. And I think, Michelle, this might be more for you, social middle school question. Can you talk more about how to prepare a negatively oriented child tends to see the worst in situations for middle school socially? Is it best to connect to the school administrators before or have the child navigate it on their own?
I would say to connect with the administrators beforehand, right? So for example, beginning this week, like my faculty and I, we've already started planning for how we're going to place students for next year in terms of their advisory placement. In some schools, they might refer to that as like a homeroom. So even though the child's class experience is departmentalized, a lot of middle schools have some type of advisory system or homeroom type of teacher, an individual that can really serve as an advocate and a cheerleader for the child's middle school experience. And so they definitely play a significant role in not just the academic experience that the child has, but in their social and emotional experiences at school as well. And so especially if you are going to be a new member of the school or of the middle school division, for us to have any kind of background knowledge or context about who your child is incredibly helpful to us as administrators and teachers, so that we can make sure that we're kind of putting appropriate supports and systems in place from the very beginning of the school year. So I always tend to err on the side of over communication. I like having those conversations and being in the loop and in the know, because I do genuinely believe that that's the best way to provide appropriate support so that students can feel successful in every aspect of their school life, whether it's social or academic.
Great, thank you. I think we've covered the questions that were posed. Maybe we'll give people just one more moment. This was incredibly helpful. If anyone has any other questions, doesn't look like it. So I just want to thank both Michelle and Jane for this incredibly helpful session. Very, very valuable. And hopefully parents are walking away today with new tools for their toolbox to support their children with this very exciting yet very big transition from elementary school to middle school. So again, please know that we are here at Smart City Kids to support you, whether it's tutoring or parenting sessions or additional workshops. We hope to see you again. And thank you again, Michelle and Jane. And thank you so much to all the parents who joined us today in the middle of their day. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for having us. Bye.